So a year ago, I made a video about building these steel barrel tumbling compost bins. So now I'd like to add another compost bin, but I want to make it a little bit different. It's going to be a vermicompost bin. This is a vermicomposting bin that I actually built about 25 years ago. It's based loosely on the OSCR Jr, that's OSCR, the Oregon Soil Corporation reactor. You can still find the directions online to build these, but really all you need are a few Rubbermaid totes. I made these out of 18-gallon totes. The directions recommend a 10-gallon tote, and really I think 10-gallon totes are probably sufficient. These, after they start to fill up, get to be a little bit heavy. So this is a 10-gallon tote. This one is a 14-gallon tote, right? This is 18-gallon, and it's a bit big and cumbersome when it gets full. So I think I'm still going to continue to use them. I'm just not going to fill them up all the way. All right, so we'll go over it a little bit, what all the parts are. So I have a lid that is kind of doubled up. You can see it's two lids here because there's a screen inside. So I put a vent in the lid and separated them a little bit so that you can get some airflow out of the top of the box. All right, so these 18-gallon totes, I've drilled holes in the bottom, quite a few holes, and I find that these Rubbermaid bins work really well for this. The bin on the bottom here is a Sterilite, and that's actually, I started with Sterilite bins, and I find that they crack when you try and drill holes in them. So the Rubbermaid seems to hold up a little bit better. This is the first bin, so we're going to start off with this bin, and the bin on the bottom is just to catch the leachate that leaks out. You know, you're going to get some, they call it worm tea or compost tea out of the bins, and you can catch that, and it's great for watering your plants. It has some nutrients and things in that for it. I'm going to just put this in here. I have some boards in the bottom so that it's not resting on the bottom bin. The directions have you using the same kind of bin to catch the leachate, but they drill holes around the top so that you get ventilation. And then this would just sit directly in that, and the bottom bin would catch the leachate. So I had these bins, so I'm just going to use these to catch the liquid. All right, so I'm going to set this up in my basement, so let's go get it set up. All right, so the first thing that you want to add to your worm bin is some bedding material. So I'm going to be using some shredded cardboard that I've dampened. You don't want it to be like sopping wet there you can squeeze water out of it. So it just needs to be kind of damp, like a wet sponge that you've wrung out. So you can use a lot of different things. You can use coconut coir, you can use peat moss, you can use office paper you can shred up and use. What you don't want to use is anything that has color, like something from a magazine or newspapers that has colored images in it. So you want to stay away from that. It just needs to be black and white. Usually black ink is soy-based, so it's okay for the worms. So, but what I'm going to do now is I want to add, to get started, about 4 to 6 inches of the shredded cardboard. All right, I suppose I could just dump it, but then you can't see what I'm doing. Now, there's a little bit of water in the bottom of this, but there's holes in the bottom of the bin, so it should just run out. It should be okay. But I'm going to go with that for now. So I've got about 4 to 6 inches. It should be fluffed up. You know, you don't want it too compact. There should be good airflow in there. All right. There, you can kind of see what's in there. All right, so I'm going to add what's actually a very small amount of worms. There's about 100 worms in here, and these are manure worms, compost worms, Icenia fetida. They're known by a lot of different names, but they're good for composting food scraps, and they tend not to run away too much. Typically, worms will eat about half of their body weight in food per day. So if you get like 800 to 1,000 worms, that's about a pound. So 100 worms is probably about 1/8 of a pound or 1/10 of a pound. You know, so that's actually a fairly small amount. It's really going to be only eating maybe an ounce of food scraps a day. So, but they do grow, in numbers, so they will start, as long as you have a good habitat for them, they will reproduce and, create more worms, and they will grow, usually doubling in size every 3 months, 90 days or so. All right, so these worms were actually shipped yesterday, so they didn't take very long to get here. The person who sells them is fairly local to me. Yeah, you can see there's a couple of them there. So at this point, they're shipped dry, so they're not super active right now. They don't like the light, so I'm going to let them not keep them out here in the light. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them kind of right in the center of this, and I am going to spray this with some water, and I'm going to put this right on top to keep it nice and dark for them in there. So with the lid on, it should stay dark too. But just to kind of cover them up a little bit, and then I'm just going to let them sit for about a week and kind of get used to their surroundings before I really start putting any food in. And then I'm going to start with just very small amounts. Alright, so I'm going to set this back up. Alright, and now I'm just going to dump them in, and I'm going to leave them all in a clump. You don't really want to spread them out. There we go. Make sure they're all in there. I don't think there's anything left in the bag. Doesn't look like it. Okay. Okay, now these worms are shipped dry with dry peat moss, so that it kind of absorbs the moisture and kind of puts them into a little bit of a hibernation state so that they can transport well. So what I'm going to do is also, in addition to having the damp bedding, I'm also going to dampen the peat moss that they were shipped in, so that they kind of revive and come back to life. So you should sprinkle them, it says, with about a half a cup of water. I'm just going to spray them with this mister. All right, that looks pretty good. Kind of mixing it around a little bit. Water tends to stay on top of the peat moss. Alright, that's probably about a half a cup. Alright, I'll show you what's in there. See them in there. They're starting to move around a little bit. Alright, and like I said, I'm just going to spray this so it doesn't absorb moisture. Okay. Covering this with the cardboard will help keep the bugs down. Alright. So now that's covered. We can put the lid on. Alright, so now I'm probably going to leave this alone for about a week. I might put just a little bit of food scraps in there, maybe an apple core or peeling or something like that. But I'm not going to put much in there. I want them to just kind of settle in and get used to it and kind of come back to life. Like I said, they've been shipped dry. They need to kind of rehydrate. And I'm also probably going to leave a light on down here because they don't like light, and that will encourage them to stay in the bin. We don't need a jailbreak. All right, so it's been about a week, so I thought I'd do an update on the worm bin and show you where it's at. All right, so looking under, looking under the cardboard, you can see I put a little bit of food over here, and it really doesn't seem like it's doing too much. I don't see... there's not a lot of microbial activity in here yet, but if you lift this up, we got lots of worms there. They seem to be doing okay, seem to be fairly happy, except that I exposed them to the light now. But any worms over here? This was an apple peel. So I did the other day see a worm or two over there, but I don't see anything right now. So this is starting to break down and decompose, so they'll get there. So they're still just adapting. All right, so it's been another week, and I wanted to check in on them. And if you look in here, there really doesn't look to be much change. They seem to be just hanging out in the middle under the cardboard, and where the see, they're eating this cardboard up. See where that wet spot is? They're eating through the cardboard. So they do like cardboard. And they're just kind of hanging out in the middle where I put them. There's no activity by any of the food that I've put in here, which is really just an apple peel and some, I believe, leek leaves, which may not have been the best choice. Although the apple core, like the peel is still here, but not the core. The apple peel is still here, but any of the apple flesh kind of looks like it might be gone. So they may have eaten that. All right, so I did get some broccoli stalk and chop that up, and I'm going to try putting that in here and see if they like that. Let's see, I'm going to dig it down in the corner here, dump it, and cover it up a little bit with the wet cardboard. All right, so for shredding the cardboard, I like to use a crosscut shredder. I just bought a 12-sheet crosscut shredder. This one's by Royal, but there's a lot of other different brands. And I believe that 12-sheet was about the minimum to be able to shred corrugated cardboard. You don't want, if you know, any thinner than that one, you won't be able to get it in, and it's going to be a lot on the motor. You know, obviously, I think you could get like 16 or 20 sheet shredders that would be above the bare minimum for shredding cardboard. But this one seemed to work. But you want to make sure that you remove any labels and any tape. You don't want that going into the plastics going into your worm bin. And then once you have it, all the tape and plastic off, you want to tear it into somewhat small pieces to feed it in. You don't want to feed in big chunks at a time because you could overheat the motor. So okay. Yep. And that makes some nice shredded cardboard for your compost bins. All right, so I'm going to have a lot of links down on the bottom. I'm going to have links for the bins and maybe for the directions and for where to get the worms. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to help this channel out, please consider subscribing or becoming a member by clicking the join button below. Thanks for watching. Take care.